All right, if you're a real estate agent that has been looking for clarity on how to position an offer, I got the best in the business as far as I'm concerned, Andrew Undem. He's going to share with us his 5 components of an offer that I know is going to get you more deals. We got some amazing feedback, obviously, on the video that you did on your buyer presentation. I mean, we're now over 50,000 views on that video. It really hit a chord. I think agents are just hungry for an understanding of exactly what they can do and maybe building a framework for themselves. Hey, I think it'd be good for us to start with this and say, hey, listen, everything we're going to talk about, this is what Andrew's doing in his business. These are some frameworks. Every state, every market in some cases is different. So utilize this as a framework, but let's don't get so literal with everything that Andrew says that you don't adjust it to your local market. Listen, Andrew, the biggest thing that I got questions about after that video we did was the specific portion where you talked about the components of an offer. If you don't mind, talk about when that comes up, because it's not just in the list in that buyer presentation, and then let's start going into some of those details.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions about the components of an offer as well. And it is just a framework, a mental model that a good agent should always be thinking of when they're advising clients. And just to break it down real quick, again, was just these 5 things. And this is where you have to be unconsciously competent. You can pull this skill, this arrow out of your quiver anytime when you're talking to a buyer, a seller, a renter, a family member, a friend, because who doesn't like to talk about real estate, especially today? And it's purchase price, contingencies, closing costs, earnest money deposit, settlement date. And we went over that a bit on the other video, but those are 5 really key things. And on this conversation, we can just dive a little bit deeper into that. And I can kind of tell you how it's helped me get buyers off the fence, get sellers off the fence when they're analyzing offers. And I love speaking of off the fence, that's our job, is to get people off the fence. And I remember a mentor of mine once said he drew a fence on the whiteboard, and I've done this many times in front of my team. Have you seen me do this, Jimmy?
Yes, we have. Yeah.
And I say, see, here's your buyers. They're on the fence. And your job is to get them off the fence into a home, or off the fence and have them stay where they are, but they can't be on the fence. And if you let them stay on the fence, Jimmy, we're just going to take down the fence and use that wood to make a casket that'll bury your real estate career. Okay. So you got to get people off the fence. And giving people clarity on what they're doing is kind of the power behind the 5 components of an offer. So whenever I'm showing property, and look, like I said in the last video, it's a process of elimination, but especially when you're in rapport with your buyers, if they really like it or they don't like it, or they start conversing, people, when they can start seeing themselves live in the space and you're showing a home, what a real pro does is I immediately say, hey, do you guys like this home? Can you see yourself living here? Yeah. And that conversation gets going. Your job is to lead them. And you immediately, what I do is I proactively say, hey, if it was me, I'd offer this. Bang, 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 bang. All 5 components, which would be, I think we could offer X price, these contingencies, this settlement date, this deposit, etc. Now, if you're going a little deeper into these 5 things, first is purchase price. You have to coach these buyers to say, hey, purchase price, if that one key component, that purchase price is directly related to days on market. So if we're seeing a home that just went on the market and we're maybe the first, second, third showing in here, oftentimes it's going to be tough to beat up the seller on their purchase price, especially when you put yourself in their shoes. That's called having good perspective. They're not going to take a lower offer if they have 10 more showings coming behind you. And there is a direct correlation between list to sales price ratio and days on the market. If a home sells quickly, it tends to get full price, maybe over, right? Common sense. If it's been on the market for 30, 45, 60 days, and I'm telling you right now, we're going to start seeing this in many markets. Jimmy, look, you're in Florida. You guys got a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
This is where you can be strategic with your offer and really be a trusted advisor when you're talking about the purchase price of a property. Of course, you can look at the historical data, the comps, but it's also a psychological game when you're dealing with a seller, because we want to give them something they want, but we have to be reasonable on that purchase price, or else they're going to wait, tell us no, not even counter, etc. So you always, when you're talking about purchase price, you really want to say, here's what the seller's probably looking for after you gather all that information. Because remember, what a great agent does is they know that they get paid in direct proportion to the information we gather. So you can't really dive into the 5 components with power unless you've done some of the other steps we covered in the other video, explaining the market dynamics, gathering intel, et cetera. Boom. Okay, so that's purchase price. Then when you move into contingencies, and this is where I think there's a new twist now that we're in this post-settlement world. With contingencies, it used to be home inspection. And you explain exactly what these inspections are and the time frames they have to fulfill them, which you're going to help with, which would typically be structural and mechanical. We want everything in this home to be working the way it's designed to work. This is not cosmetics. What we're doing is we're future pacing, because there's a whole art to explaining to a buyer after the inspection how we're going to respond to that. And that starts up front before you even make the offer. Home inspection. And depending on the property and where you live, is there going to be environmental? Are we doing a termite or a wood destroying insect inspection? Well, septic, pool, you name it. You put those in there. I always put about 10 days. That's normal in our market. And then you say part of our financing contingency is going to be this home has to appraise. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you can't even buy a home that the bank doesn't think is worth what you're paying for it. This is a layer of protection. Whenever you're getting a mortgage loan, there's going to be an appraisal. You're going to pay for that outside of closing. And this is going to tie into closing costs because people don't explain this stuff. You're going to have to pay for your inspection outside of closing, and you're going to pay for that appraisal outside of closing because those are done before you settle and they're there to protect you. And you just let them know up front. Then they're not saying, why do I have to pay $600 for an appraisal? That inspector charged me $800. Of course, these are guards on the highway to make sure you don't bash into the walls too much, and we can bail on this thing if you want. In the other contingency, that how I'm explaining it now is we're going to make this offer contingent on the seller agreeing to pay a buyer's agent. That way, you don't have to pay. Alan Dalton, there's 2 people that I really get a lot of influence from, and I get ideas from everybody, but Alan Dalton's one of them, and the other one is Sharon. And Sharon was my coach before anyone knew who he was at Real. He was a guy to tell us.
Yeah.
Alan came out with something yesterday, and I listened to it, and he's brilliant because he just sits around all day and thinks, and he knows this industry inside and out, and he's just a great thinker.
Yeah.
And he said, everything you do is a contingency fee. I wouldn't call it a commission. I wouldn't call it anything other than a contingency fee because your fee is contingent on a successful closing. I think that's language that I may adopt. And again, I'm not a lawyer. This is all so new to us, but I think that's a beautiful way to put in your components of an offer, purchase price contingencies. Let's make the offer contingent on the seller being willing to pay me. Because we know in this world right now, a lot of sellers are still saying, yes, please, it's predetermined. We will co-op. Some won't. Some want you to negotiate. But either way, in the spirit of transparency, in the spirit of the new landscape, I think that's a beautiful thing to put in right there because it's a conversation piece. So home inspection, appraisal, compensation, right there in that contingency period, in that bullet point. Next, you have your deposit. That's a simple one. Oh, go ahead.
Can we go before we get to that? Because there's a couple things that I know that agents are going to have questions on right here. And I want to bring a couple of things on the purchase price, because I think I don't want to just skate past this, because I think you made a great point of the timing, the days on market versus the list of sales price. What we've seen is we have a lot of agents that they lead with, but when they first start showing property, and they say, hey, if you look at our overall landscape, and we are in a market where we are seeing, list of sales price come down because the average days on market are going up. But if you just do the overall, hey, and you just say, hey, listen, in our market right now, we're at 96% list of sales price. But that doesn't give the full understanding. And what can happen is if you don't give the full understanding, you may have a property that's brand new to market that has been priced extremely well, that is going to still receive multiple offers, even in a slowdown time period. And you've got a buyer whose expectation is that I'm going to get at least 4% off of this on average. And all of a sudden now you set expectations in a way that are going to be very difficult to meet. So I think what you said there, and it's almost like we're forward pacing some of this stuff.
Yes.
We're telling them, hey, look, your purchase price is probably going to be in relation to the number of days on market. So when we do this, understand, I'm going to give you the evaluation of this in a way, because every single situation is going to be different. Pricing could be different to where actual market value is. The days on market and the number of showings that they have is going to influence things. So from that standpoint, I thought that was tremendous on the purchase price. portion that you mentioned there. The contingency part, I love what you're doing as far as talking about what each of these are. In our previous video, you mentioned that you even will tell people something along the lines of, hey, the contract gives us the right to purchase this home. Do you want to speak a little more on that? Because I think it's a powerful point to show some value from your perspective and understanding that, hey, you're on the same side of the table with them on the contingency side. Can you speak a little more about that if you don't mind?
The mindset always has to be it's you and your client versus the world.
Yes.
It should never be
right.
There's no reason to ever have an adversarial relationship with your client. Sometimes in our industry, so that it happens. Oh, and people blame instead of taking responsibility for it. My buyer's unreasonable. The seller's unreasonable. The market's doing this. The lawsuit's making that's blame. That's weak loser stuff. If you take responsibility and say, hey, I'm with you, you're with me, it's us against the world, that'll kind of open up this mindset. And here's the thing, the agent, for whatever reason, sometimes they feel under pressure. They're not comfortable explaining these things, in which case they cannot make them comfortable because they're not comfortable. You should never have any pressure because you're not buying anything. They are. Put yourself in their shoes. They need to feel that you really do have their back. And I know you do. I know almost every agent does in their heart of hearts, but they're not articulating it and showing it in a way that says, no matter what, I'm going to get you what you want. And if you don't want it, I'm not going to push back. I do not pressure anybody to make a decision. We simply offer advice and perspective. And a lot of times they want to be led. Make no mistake about it. They want to be led. And I didn't say this on the last video, but influence is an important thing. You want to influence your buyer to do the right thing, not for your own selfish reasons, but to put them in a good position. Whoever is more certain in any interaction will influence the other person. Right. So you need to provide a level of certainty with what you're saying, and you can't do that unless you've studied the market. Now, because it's different every single time, you can't have this pre-canned because it's so hyper local. Forget even the zip code.
Right.
You go down to the neighborhood and the price point. Because guess what? 500 to 700 doesn't interact like 300 to 400, and the million plus is totally different too. Which is why once you know what your client's looking for, and this is a little step deeper, because this 5 pillars thing, you can rattle this off anywhere, and we can talk about that, Jimmy. I do this all the time. I'm going to soccer practice now. I'm blessed to have all these kids, and now people always ask me about real estate, and you start banging out. Well, here's what you got to think about: bang, 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 bang. And if they want to continue the conversation, we can go deeper. And once you uncover some things. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's more of a mindset and a framework in which if in your heart of hearts, you're really just trying to provide them with incredibly accurate information and then certainty on making a decision that's going to be right for them.
Yeah.
And guess what?
Let me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, what they say influences what you say. Nothing's predetermined. Okay. Because people will not argue with their own data. They will argue with you all day, but they won't argue with their own data. They will defend what they help build. So when you're showing these things, you're not telling them everything. You're just giving them the options and say, how do you interpret this? Here's what I'm thinking. And you co-create it. Because if it's always you jamming stuff down their throat, these are adults. They want to make their own decision. They want to buy, they hate to be sold, right? That's the old cliche, and it's true. So there's an art to making it, hey, look, this is what I'm seeing. And by the way, every open house, every time you meet a buyer and you know what they're looking for, you should have, here's everything in this neighborhood. Here's everything in the zip code, depending on where you want to start, and hit them with the raw data. Homes are selling an average of 32 days at 97% of list price. It's all right here. So you can expect potentially to get a 3% discount if you're looking in this price point in this thing. Now, sometimes it all depends on days on market and other things. But when you show them that, you know what they're looking at when you're showing and drawing, and I like to do it by pen and paper, as I've said before, and you draw out, hey, purchase price, closing costs, contingencies, settlement date, deposit. When they're looking at that piece of paper and that data, they're looking at your expertise around a process. I find most agents don't do that. They rely on, what do you guys want to do? Hey, I think we want to make an offer. Okay, what do you want to offer?
Yes.
Horrible.
It is.
It's like going to the dentist and saying, my tooth's fucked up. And they go, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to pull it? I don't know. My tooth's messed up. All right, let's
Right.
start
Yeah.
banging on your knee with a hammer to make sure your reflexes
Yeah.
are right. It's
Yeah.
because people don't have clarity on what their job is. And that's what
Mhm.
these last two series have been about. It's just your job is to provide certainty, clarity, education to get people what they want in a manner in which they're going to say nice things about you on the internet.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is one of those things too where I hear so many of these things influence the influences that you and I have had in our careers where we're talking about take your realtor hat off, put your client hat on, Mark Stark directly, influence both of us. When you're talking about Alan Dalton and the language, the way it's both influenced us, I think this is one of those where understand that as you're preparing these, putting these things in your own voice, because what we do is we'll take the best ideas and we'll put them in our own voice. Make sure you're making this where it is authentically you. What you talked about as far as you have to be fluid. It's based on what they say is where you're going with the conversation and understanding, because every person has a different need, concern, or question that they have, and be able to be flexible enough to understand how to provide that in the way that they want to receive it is absolutely vitally important. All right, look, we've only gotten through two of these. Let's talk about the deposit portion or here, yeah, let's go into the deposit
Well,
portion.
the deposit's easy. In our market, the standard rule of thumb is about 1%. And you just
Right.
make that clear. You're going to put up a 1% deposit. You're going to get that back if we don't proceed with the sale, as long as we're operating within the terms of the contract. And by the way, I always like to point out, I like to bring a blank contract with me. On ours in Maryland, it says, this is a legally and binding contract. If you do not understand, seek competent legal advice. I read that to them too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like, because there has to be a level of, hey, you're not the lawyer, but you know this offer. It's what we work with every day. Again, it makes you look like an expert. So deposit's super easy.
Do
Now,
you ever do anything to move it around? I mean, are there situations where you utilize deposit to make an offer look more attractive?
100%. And it's
Okay.
so variable. Like I work with a lot of investors, we'll put up a large non-refundable deposit.
Right.
We'll make the whole purchase price the deposit, non-refundable cash, no matter what we're closing on this thing. But that's so variable. I think most buyers, your typical retail buyer, will put up a reasonable deposit in
Correct.
escrow, and that will
Right.
be applied towards your funds at closing, whether it goes towards your down payment, closing costs, whatever, at settlement, or we're going to get it back. And
Yeah.
I always like to say, because this is true, I've never lost someone's deposit. 12 years, thousands of times.
That's a great
And
point.
and sometimes maybe these buyers should have lost their deposit, but it's me and them. I don't care. Even if my side potentially makes a mistake, because we're dealing with human beings, I got their back. I don't start
Right.
blaming them.
Right.
Maybe I should have explained that better. It's the life is so much better when you take responsibility for everything and stop blaming anything on anybody. I learned that
Yes.
from Mark Stark, and I had the
Yep.
privilege of working with this guy for a couple of years. So that's a game changer. Now, settlement date is another key one where you really can explain, just like purchase price, is if you're looking at home and a home is vacant, it's easy to assume that that seller wants someone to settle on that home right away. And if the home is lived in, we don't know what that seller's situation is. If we uncover what their needs are and what they're looking for and give them what they want on settlement date, maybe we get what we want, little discount on price, or whatever the case may be. So settlement date is super critical, because so many times if your terms are better, even if someone offers a better price, but they like your terms because you did your due diligence, you're going to win the deal. So you always want to know, what's the seller's ideal time frame. We don't know if that seller wants to stay there for 2 months after closing so they can find their next house. We don't know what their kids are doing. We don't know how much time they need to move. So settlement date, super critical. I like to play the game called, hey, you pick the price, I pick the terms. Terms win every time.
Right.
Because terms, we can riddle this thing with contingencies and never settle.
Right.
So you have all that in there. And one more thing that just came to mind that I used to do all the time, and I'm going to be doing it again. And new home sales reps do this every time. And Jimmy, we'll talk about new homes. That's a whole nother world of business that
Yeah.
most traditional agents don't focus on. And they're familiar with it. They understand. Hey, by the way, who makes all the inventory?
That's right.
The
Yeah.
builders do.
Right.
When you're explaining the terms of an offer, what you also have to point out, and when you're looking at, hey, whatever loan program they're going with, we covered this on the last one, which is, what's my monthly payment and cash out of pocket? Those are the two numbers. That's all a function of interest rate and fees, which we want to help them, get to a solid spot. You want to explain the tax advantages. If you sell after tax payments instead of total monthly payments, you're going to be a lot better off. And it's easy to do because in this country, hopefully moving forward as well, all your interest is tax deductible. Your property taxes, you write off. Your closing costs the first year you buy the home, you write that off. If it's an investment property, there's a whole nother world. We're not getting into that, but just your common house. So if you're looking at a typical 400K home at today's 6.6 1/8, 6.125 rate, which is a good rate right now, you're looking at $20,000, $30,000 in write-offs. So if you're intimate with your clients and you're having an adult conversation, adult to an adult, so if your income's X, say you make 150K a year, well, now buying this home, you're going to have a 30K write-off. It's almost like you're getting taxed on 120. That saves you X. And you got to know your tax rates. This is why it's
Right.
a student to be a student of business. You have to understand what's going on in the world because people care about this stuff and
Well,
no
yeah, they
one's
do.
talking to them about it.
Right.
But you are because you're the expert and you're referable. You say, boom, okay, well, this actually, if you buy this house, you're actually going to save an extra $600 a month in taxes. So that $2,400 payment is kind of like an $1,800 payment. Isn't that cool? Why don't they teach us that in schools?
Mhm.
So that you blend in any one of these bullet points, you can go in any number of directions. When you start bringing them, the market dynamics impacts every single one of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're what the seller gives you in terms of what you've uncovered impacts every single one of those bullet points, and your expertise around guiding it. So again, to kind of close how I started is when the buyer likes the house. This is where we need to get better as an industry as a whole. And you got to jump into pointing them in the right direction. Hey, if I'm you, I would offer 410, 10 days for a home inspection, 21 days for a financing contingency. Ask the seller to cover my 2.5% fee. We're going to give them a 4K 1% deposit. And I think, you know what, since you've been verified with your pre-approval, watch the last video, we can close in 21 days. This place is vacant. I know this guy doesn't want to pay his electric bill and his property tax bill. So that's what I would offer. What do you think? If you say that with certainty and clarity and you're not making shit up,
Mhm.
let's do it.
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll have this written up. If you have your admin do it, however you do it, we're going to get this over to half an hour. Click, click, sign. One clean PDF. Now we're rolling. Instead of, what do you think? What do you think? I guess we should talk to our mom. Does my
Right.
CPA need to know? No, they want to be led. You got to be a
That's
leader
exactly
out
right.
there on the
Yeah.
street. And Jimmy, real
Yeah.
quick, did you know? I'm not sure if I told you this. Do you know why Baltimore is building more sidewalks than any other metropolitan in the United States?
No, Andrew, why are they building more sidewalks?
I'm glad you asked. Thanks. It's because these streets aren't for everybody. Okay. That's Jimmy's line. He let me do
Yeah.
but it's true. The streets aren't for everybody. You got to study this stuff. Study the
Yeah.
last video, study and make it your own. Because when you make
That's
it
it.
your own, you're in alignment with yourself and it's obvious because people have a good BS meter. And that's why
Yeah.
that unconsciously competent, that's what you're working for. I can talk about this anytime, anywhere to anyone. I don't care if they're a high-powered attorney or they're a first-time home buyer. No one's going to tell me how to operate in my domain because this is what I do.
So good. And let me add a couple quick things to this because I want to get to closing costs, which we kind of talked about with the contingency
Oh, I
on the
skipped
fee.
that one. Yeah,
That's okay because we're going to come back to it because it is something that I want to touch on. One thing I would say too is I'm just going to kind of give you the framework because when we're kind of future pacing some of this stuff too, we will say, hey, listen, there are really three different types of markets. There is a market where the seller is dominant. When you think back to the pandemic time, I'm just going to use our local market. Obviously, there were very few properties for sale, so the seller kind of had the hammer, so to speak, or had the upper hand in those situations. So consequently, in that situation, typically in a negotiation, we can typically negotiate in a balanced market either our purchase price or our terms. In a balanced market, we can do one of those. When we're in that seller dominated market, like we have been in the past, you typically as a buyer have very little leeway in negotiating on either of those. So you got to pick which one you want to get a little bit on, but understand where we are. As we're moving back now, where we are currently, where we're in a pretty balanced market, but we're moving into the buyer side, especially with properties that have been on the market for a little bit longer. Now we have the ability to potentially, depending on the situation, negotiate both price and terms. So understanding that I will give you advice based on the specific property, the days on market it's in, where we are in this cycle, and understanding the overall temperature of the market so that we can make sure that we're taking advantage of all the opportunities we have, but also so that we're being realistic to get you what you ultimately want, which is to purchase that home. So that's kind of the way we speak of those things. And because every situation is different, but understanding, like you said, that, hey, when you know what's going on in the market overall, you know what's happening in the local neighborhood, and you know specifically based on the days on the market, what may be happening with that seller or the information you've gathered from the discussions with that listing agent, now we have the ability to represent them at the highest level possible. So those are those things where it's just communicating in a way that shows them not only that you understand this, but that you are on the same side of the table with them, working for the best deal possible for them. You brought up, because we do the same thing where we're talking about what is the net as far as the monthly payment.
Right.
What we'll do a lot of cases is say, hey, listen, I'm not your accountant. You probably ought to check with them to verify some of these things. But let me tell you what my experience shows me and what I look at when I'm personally purchasing this based on my situation. I always kind of try to frame those things from that standpoint just to make sure we're covered on those things. But if you're not talking to them about what the effective monthly payment is to them and how it affects them tax-wise and what the savings are, you're really doing a disservice to them and you're doing a disservice to your business. So I could not agree more on that. Anything you want to add to that? And then if you don't mind, go into the closing cost portion of this to make sure that we touch all five here.
If you're going to be a real estate practitioner and call yourself an expert or a strategic advisor, it's not enough to just be good at just the real estate side, because you should know as much about the loan types and the programs and where rates are as some of the lenders. You don't have to be as well versed, but you have to be very competent. Same thing on taxes. You're not an accountant. You're never going to be an accountant. You don't need to dive into people's lives on that, but there are basic rules on what you can write off and what you can't write off. That's okay to talk about.
Right.
You're not going to sign it on letterhead saying I guarantee, but look into that. You have to know these things if you want to be an expert, because like we said on the last one, people won't follow someone they can't learn from. They just won't. If you're not educating them, you're like everybody else. You're the sea of sameness. But that's not the people watching this. They want to be really good. So, and I mentioned this on the last one, when you bring up closing costs, everybody's heard of that term, but no one's broken it down for them. And this is very simple. This isn't complicated. This is where you have to be an expert and know about title and how escrows work and how the whole closing process works with title insurance and otherwise. A lot of people like that idea of getting the reissue rate. I've had a lot of calls on that.
Yeah.
But when you say closing cost is one of these components of an offer, have you heard of that term? Yes. Has anyone broken down what exactly those are? They're going to say no. Say closing costs are costs associated with a buyer acquiring and actually closing and settling on real property. Now, in the state of Maryland, and if I'll use Baltimore City, it's where I'm sitting right now. Baltimore City in the state of Maryland has what's called a transfer and recordation tax. It's a total of 3%, split equally between the buyer and the seller. Now, this is negotiable, but almost every contract is split. That's 1.5% to you. That's a big closing cost. 400K home, boom, 6 G's right there. Okay, so we have transfer and recordation taxes. Your lender is going to ask you to put up money in escrow for homeowners insurance and property taxes. You'll see this is called prepaids when we start looking at some of these loan estimates. That's money out of your pocket that's put over here. So now we have transfer and recordation. We have prepaid property taxes, prepaid insurance. And again, this is variable because sometimes depending on your loan type, you don't have to escrow, but we're just assuming that's the rate there. Then it's the buyer's responsibility. You get to select the title company. In our state, it's not an attorney state. We have title companies. Some call them escrow officers, whatever. You're going to select the person who's going to go ahead and transfer ownership from that seller to you. And there's fees associated with that. And they're going to offer you something called title insurance, which is a one-time fee that protects you into the future, or it protects you all the way back for anything that happened with this property that guarantees you're the owner. And if anyone comes and tries to make a claim on this property, you're safe because you have insurance on it. And this title insurance company is going to say, no matter what, you're the owner of this property. So you have title insurance in there, maybe some settlement fees. That's what closing costs are. And we can negotiate and ask the seller to pay for some of that. But as Jimmy, as you were just saying, depending on the market, that's a key term. So you have to explain the closing costs so they know what they are, because human nature is people like to know what's going to happen before it happens. You don't want to, we
Right.
get in this trap. If we don't do this, you surprise them with it. They look at the loan
Mhm.
estimates.
Yeah.
What is all this stuff? You can put if you charge an admin fee, that can be in there. We have one and we use it for good reason. We have legal review, we have document storage, we have certain things we need an administrative fee for, but you bake that in up front. And that's how you explain the closing cost piece of it. But again, you have to be unconsciously competent. You can't make stuff up. Why is closing cost 3%? I don't know. You can't say that.
Right.
It's so
Right.
easy to lose trust, as easy as it is to gain it, because it is semi-easy. If you know what you're talking about, it's so easy to lose it. And these things are easy to do, but they're also easy not to do. Because you and I both know sometimes you skip over some of the stuff and you take it for granted. You can't. So I think we had purchase price, closing costs, contingencies, deposit, and settlement date pretty good. But this is going to be an ongoing thing, and you have to play with it, role play with it. And just, I'm telling you, there's nothing better, something about writing things down. Then
Yeah.
remember in college, that's how you
I
study.
agree.
You write it down and you say, ooh, when I explain this, I'm going to put this little nugget in there. Ooh, I'm going to say, I get people what they want and have them say nice things about me on the internet here. I'm going to talk about the market dynamics here. Whatever makes sense for you in that situation, you just pull it out. It's never the same presentation every time, and it never goes the same way every time.
Yeah.
But you always, always debrief with yourself, or if you have an accountability partner or another agent who's on the journey with you, who's trying to achieve some level of mastery, you can always debrief whatever situation you were just in and grade yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I didn't
Andrew.
even talk about closing costs. I didn't talk. So that's huge. Always
Yeah.
debrief and find ways to improve.
Well, Andrew, I think everything is different, in every situation. And the key is the more reps you have in this, these are as our buddy Jimmy Mackin says, make sure you've got your shots on goal. The more of those you have, the better you get and more accurate you get at understanding those things. I've always thought of it, and I've kind of said it this way, that it's, you want to give them the comfort of what's next or next steps. And so from that standpoint, in your buyer presentation, by the way, we've talked a lot about this. It'll be the video right at the end of this video that you can just click on to go straight into that if you haven't seen it yet. And I would highly recommend it. But for me, it's like telling them what the next steps are. In your buyer presentation, you walk them through and give them a high level understanding of what this whole process is, but it gives them an understanding of what's next. So when you're doing this and you're giving the 5 components of the offer, it's just natural for them to understand, oh, well, this is what we were talking about. This is what we do next. And by having that, I use the example of, if I wake up in the middle of the night and it's pitch dark, I walk very guarded, because I don't know if I might run into something. But if the lights are on and I can see it and I understand what my next step is and there's nothing in the way, I'm going to walk with a lot more boldness, with a lot more confidence into that next step. So absolutely. And understanding, like you said, the flow may change a little bit depending on what we recognize is there. So I've always thought of it as the arrows. You need to have a quiver of these things, of these arrows, of these things, like you said, of, I'm going to do this so that you'll say nice things about me on the internet. Those types of things where you've got all of these things in that quiver, so to speak. You just pull the arrow at that time. But ultimately, listen, I told you this. I think we did this one time we were playing golf and you were making fun of my clubs. And I told you, I said, Andrew, listen, man, ultimately, it's the Indian, not the arrow. Let me say this. You can have all the arrows you want in the quiver, but unless they have confidence and you have the professionalism to be able to generate that confidence that they have in you, it's irrelevant. So make sure you're coming into a place where you have the confidence that you know that you're the most prepared and most professional agent. And listen, ultimately, if they don't do business with you, I've heard you say this before, it is going to cost them not to have the professional that you are representing them in that transaction. So listen, this components of an offer, this is an ongoing conversation. As always, you always bring the heat. I know people got value out of this. I know that you've already seen a few of these. Listen, if you've got somebody that is thinking about moving to the Baltimore metro area, how would they get in touch with you to send those referrals your way, Andrew?
Well, Jimmy, I've gotten 6 since we did that video 2 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago? Yeah,
and one of them was
great.
one of your agents who works with,
Yeah, it was.
you.
It absolutely was.
And I'm going to be selling her condo. She owns it in White Marsh,
That's great.
So look, we love the referrals. We'll always take really good care of them. We're going to make you look good. And also, if anyone's seeing this and you're in Maryland If you're in the greater Baltimore metro, big metro area here, that's where we serve. And I'm looking to grow the team. We had 27 agents 2 years ago. We're down to 12, but I want winners. We want people who are into this stuff.
Good.
It's people who can showcase complexity and deliver simplicity. And to close it out, you have to want to do this. I see a lot of stuff. You just see it in lab coat agents. It's a fest. We don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay. You get to do this. You don't have to do this. This is a privilege in this country that we can do it. And if you can just have that mindset and you want to learn this, you can be as good as you want to be, but you got to want to do it. So no one's going to make you study this stuff. So that's all I have to say on that. I love the business and I love helping out other agents who are on the same wavelength. So I appreciate the opportunity, Jimmy.
It's always good. I'm trying to figure out whether Noah's going to get a lot of editing in here on taking out words, or we're just going to let it ride. I'm trying to figure that. Let it ride. All right. Sounds great. All right. Listen, everybody, I know you got some value out of this. Reach out to Andrew with those referrals. Let him know how much you appreciate it. And the next video that's going to be coming up is specifically that buyer presentation. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure you stick around for that. Take care, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks for watching the video. I specifically chose the video below for you because it builds on the one you just watched. I hope it's helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.